So today I'm very glad to be here in Salzburg together with Andrew Munn to start this new project which involves a series of topics among which media resistance, but also an overarching topic that I would name simply realism. Andrew is an artist, is a singer working with opera and lead repertoire mainly, but is also an activist and is very much engaged with some philosophical references that we have in common and that revolve around this main theme of realism. So today this theme will be dealt with the aid of a very special tool that is a bit at the center of this whole project, which is the smartphone. So through the idea and the relation with the smartphone, we will investigate several different topics. So perhaps my first question to you, Andrew, is how would you describe your relation with the smartphone?
My relationship with the smartphone. What using the word relationship, it reminds me of actually a post I saw once on social media of someone describing their relationship to their phone, which went along the lines of saying that I go to sleep with it at night. I wake up with it in the morning. I see it in the morning. I spend breakfast with it. I spend my meals with it, and kind of almost talking about the smartphone in this post that the person made. It was in a way of talking about it as a joke about it being their primary partner, and that's immediately where my mind went when you use the word relationship with the smartphone, especially right now. I'm living on my own in Salzburg. I'm further disconnected from my direct social networks, my partnership, and in that sense, I think the smartphone, for better and for worse, becomes this kind of conduit of social contact for me, and then it also becomes a kind of replacement or a time filler in moments where I feel without a direct moment of aim, or without or when there's a sense of loneliness that comes in. Then the smartphone is kind of the first thing that I pick up. That's this morning. I would say that's my answer. I mean, I could go through a list of, like, these are the things that I do with my smartphone. I make recordings. I check my email. I send text messages. But I think that those activities are all kind of they are the surface level manifestations of something that might be deeper in the relationship with the smartphone.
Yeah, definitely. And this brings me to my second question, because I recently read about this concept from philosopher Levi Bryant, who does a kind of taxonomy of objects, objects in the sense of, in a very broad sense of also concepts, experiences, etc. And he names a particular series of objects. He names them black holes, which means they have this power of sucking up life, basically, because they radiate so much energy. So an example that he gives is a terminal illness. Now, on a smaller level of everyday life, would it be fair to think of smartphones and, of course, other objects, laptops, for example? Once it used to be the TV set, as this kind of black holes objects, which, as you say, accompany you throughout your day. They have this power of radiating energy and sucking up attention, perception, affection, perhaps, I don't know.
I think it does. I don't want to give too much of I don't want to assign too much of that power to the smartphone itself, and I think that instead of it being a facet of the object itself, I think it's more of an aspect of the relationship between the object and the user. And I mean, since you're bringing Levy Bright, I'm thinking back on the reading that we were doing in the fall on object-oriented ontology and talking about and which is discussed the kind of the ultimate unknowability of the inside of an object or of the nature of an object. And I think it's a really banal example then of the smartphone, where of course it presents the surface and we see the icons and we see again what it does for us and how we use it, but then behind it there's this entirely different but integral function of whether it's data collection and all of the ways in which the smartphone operates that are not that are essential to what the smartphone is in terms of its function in society and its function in our technological systems and our social and political systems, but is not the thing that it presents itself. It's not the surface appearance of it, or the surface use of it. And I think the black hole element of a smartphone, I think it is a little. I think it is in relationship to the way it manipulates our natural needs and desires, and the way, whether it's as simple as that the color settings on a smartphone are engineered to really to appeal and to stimulate our visual senses in a way that actually physically draws our eyes to it and elicits that bodily biological response. So I think that the black hole element, the element of whether we call it addiction or just being pulled more and more into it, is something that's more in us than in the phone itself.
Yeah, for sure. Let's say it's, but still, I'm very struck by the disproportion of this layering of reasons for attraction. No, you were mentioning the social aspect, but also this whole set of other functions. So there is this disproportion between this set of stratification and the size itself of the object.
And
the very scanty weight and size, and to me this makes it radically different also from a laptop or a TV set, or not to mention a desktop, because you can have such an intimate relation. You can hold it in your pocket, carry it everywhere. That's a real, to me, now that you're talking about it, perhaps this is the real divide between this and former technologies.
Yeah, I suppose if we think of the power of a technology should be correlated to like the physical size of it, but well, two things. First of all, I'll reveal my my adolescent fantasy nerd self, where I was an avid reader of Lord of the Rings before the films, and hearing you talk about the smartphone and the power of the smartphone, it makes me think of the power of this ring of power. So it's, and in this sense, there's a long tradition of having small objects that grant the person that possesses it some kind of supernatural powers, whether it's the power of invisibility or the connection to, in the case of Lord of the Rings, both the power of invisibility and the connection to this like vast, all-knowing evil overlord. And it's an object that one can keep in their pocket, can use at any time, and then also with the more that one uses this ring, it changes the person itself, and the person kind of takes on whether it's more selfish aspects and kind of loses their individual personhood over time. And this, of course, is like early 20th century fantasy writing, but I think there's something there in the way that the phone is an object that we're all granted, and we're granted this object with the idea that it will amplify, whether it's amplify our personal power in the sense of like broadcasting our lives on social media to become part of the conversation, or in extreme cases become gain more influence. But at the same time, these are objects that then bind us closer into systems of social control and also systems of capitalism, and in which essentially the phone is it's my direct link to the market in the sense that I could pull up my smartphone and download a banking app and actually be making market trades on it. I could download an Amazon app and order any good, or decide to take a picture of what I want to sell and upload that. So it is this immediate connection to the global network, and I feel that in that sense what I'm saying is it's old news what I'm saying, but there is an aspect of it that then the part of the power of it is that I've had a smartphone for 5 years, and it's hard even though I'm critical of it, it's hard for me to imagine giving it up. Sure. Which again brings me back to my fantasy reference of the Lord of the Rings, in which this ring of power that is given is nearly impossible for the one that possesses the ring to give up that ring or to destroy the ring. It becomes like an aspect of their selfhood is imbued in this object. And at that point, even though I'm very critical of the smartphone, and I think that if you were asking me if I think it's a net social good or not, I would say that I don't think it has been a good thing for society or for people in general, or maybe even for myself. But at the same time, the notion of giving it up is, there's something in me that's like, oh no, I can't do that. It's this kind of like inner weakness that then becomes very strong at the moment, at the notion of giving up such an object.
Yeah. It's interesting because while you were mentioning this ring, this very small object that catalyzes all this power, I was thinking that it's true. I mean, the smartphone is small, it's portable. As such, it gains this great power and this great flexibility and attraction, but it's also easier to lose. No, it's easier to get lost. And I think this is an interesting point, because also connecting to what you were mentioning. So on the one hand, it makes you a new person. I believe this is no exaggeration to say that. And in many respects, it makes you a better person. It makes you a freer person.
To have a smartphone.
Yeah, I believe it is building different people and different societies. For example, I was in Rome some weeks ago, and I witnessed this phenomenon. Probably it's very common in many cities where you can just have these scooters, these electric scooters in the city, and just with a smartphone you can use them. This is great. This is just a fantastic opportunity, and it has the potential to change the whole configuration of how people relate to an urban space. Without a smartphone, this would be just unthinkable. But then I connect a lot to this experience you're mentioning of the fear of loss. So what if I lose it? What happens if I lose it? What happens if I don't have access to it anymore? So there is this double bind of power and fragility and
dependency. Yeah.
Dependency, which is very interesting to me. And actually, I myself, as a person who doesn't own a smartphone, I'm beginning to live this extreme experience as an experiment. Like, can we still do that? And how far can we go with that? So, like, I'm feeling, with all respect of the difference, but I'm feeling a bit like these people who go I don't know, try to survive in the woods or in the ice and see, okay, let's see where I can bring it. Perhaps it's an exaggeration, but life is becoming more and more hostile towards people who don't own a smartphone.
Yeah, well, the assumption now is that one owns it, so the social infrastructure is set up for that. I one with this idea of fragility and loss, and then also coming back to some of the earlier statements about it being this small object. I wonder if, though we're kind of conceiving of the smartphone too much as just the individual phone that we carry in our pockets, and not the broader network of objects and network of energy and information that the smartphone itself that is in my pocket, or at the moment is on the table, is just one node, or like one little piece of the bigger object that it actually is. And in that sense, then, with the idea of fragility and the idea of loss, there is a because of the cloud the cloud in which data is in the sky. This is actually one of my least favorite terms, the cloud, because it gives this idea that data is immaterial when it's actually just it's sitting in hot pieces of metal in places that energy is cheap. But at this point, if I lose my phone, or if I spill water on it now, the phone itself is just a vessel for my data. And in that sense, my data is all of the recordings from my conservatory training, conservatories from last night's performance in the opera house, 8,000 photos or so of my life in the last 5 years. It's my logins and such, and for banking, email, kind of all basic essentials of communication and economy. But all of that, if I lost the phone and I went to get a new phone, I could then just hit the button that says synchronize my phone to the cloud, where all of that data is backed up, and I would have this replaceable object. So like the object itself, it has this kind of replaceability. The physical object itself is not the thing, but at the same time, part of there is energy put into the design of it to make it into this appealing object that is tactile. I mean, how it's so to go from keyboards and mouse to the direct sensual experience of a touchscreen is in a way, it's something that is abstracting us further and further from our awareness and our experience and at least our psychological embedment in our material reality, the phone. But at the same time, it's using a even more direct interface with by a physical interface with us to remove us further from direct experience. And I find that a kind of curious contradiction.
It is indeed. Yes, I have to say that to be really honest, my biggest reservation against smartphone is really in this physical relation. I dislike the physicality of the contact with the screen, and the kind of vibration it emits, but also the kind of quite annoying, I have to say, fluidity by which very cleverly some websites trick you into clicking into the right spot. This I find really, really, perhaps is the main reason for me not to own a smartphone, to be really honest. But it's interesting that you point out how the cloud is takes good care of not losing you, even if you try to lose it, it will remember.
Let's call the cloud from now on like the heat radiating piece of metal. This is my new term for the cloud, the heat radiating piece of metal.
It's true. And well, clouds can be very, very severe, no? Very real.
Absolutely.
So perhaps it's a good term. And yes, perhaps it's also a very interesting point, this ambiguity between directness, as you mentioned, because you have this very physical contact with actions, but on the other hand, real action, also destructive action happens elsewhere, to the point that most people, I'm sure, don't even think that sharing a picture requires
Some
energy. We're talking about very real energy of burning oil or however it happens. And I think this is a very critical point, and I wonder how this can be brought to awareness, if ever, because my feeling when I see people every minute basically performing this action, they are doing it as in a cloud, as nothing would, it's not like driving a car even.
I keep on coming back to kind of mythological ideas or references in this. So I mean, when we use the term myth to mean like myth versus fact, of course, then it's a myth that the phone is this frictionless, or that the internet is this frictionless, magical world in which information moves freely, and there is no cost. But the where my mind went with your statement of the energetic cost of all of these actions is this kind of sense of, it's a little bit of a deal. I feel like I've made a deal with the devil if I'm posting on Instagram. I'm very much feeding something that would be construed as a sin of narcissism, of some kind of selfish urge to broadcast an aspect of myself or an aspect of my work to get adoration and to feed pride. And I'm doing that by unnecessary use of energy with full consciousness that I mean, I know that if I'm posting a video of my of an opera aria, that does is it have an energetic cost, and I know what that looks like because of some of the places I've worked as an activist, and what that means in terms of poisoned water, what it means in terms of devastated landscapes. But and I'm engaging in this activity that I know is not just a secondary part of this, of driving this destructive energy consuming system further, but is also rather integral to it, and is part of kind of casting this grand illusion of a frictionless information and energy system, which here in Salzburg and in places with wealth and power, we can live under that illusion because the destruction is far away. Exactly. But if you're in West Virginia, or if you're in oil fields, then you see what the cost of these devices are. Or I'm also thinking, of course, of the I'm referencing fossil fuels, but at the same time, now with the rise of more battery technology, we're now seeing the cost of mineral mining, and now that's working its way into the headlines, where I think, of course, that there's been human and biological costs of these kind of rare earth mining activities for decades, but now that it's battery technology is gaining a kind of central place in our idea of what it means to be green. The thing that we can be thankful for of people that want to be more green is that they will at least point out the fact that, this is problematic now that we're using too much of this of metals, whether it's cobalt or metals that are being mined increasingly in Central Africa and driving this vast kind of mineral rush in those places. So I think we see increasingly that whether it is batteries or whether it is burning things, that it's a destructive practice. And in that sense, your image of going with a smartphone as being going without a smartphone as being akin to moving into the woods and seeing if you can survive on your own is actually, I think, a very apt feeling, because to me it points out that I think energy, if we take seriously that that environmental destruction from mining and oil extraction and our energy infrastructure is a problem, then I think the conclusion is that energy itself is the problem. Electricity itself is the problem, and that I think we'll see over the next decades that as we reinvent our energy systems into what we now call more clean energy or green energy, that it's just going to produce new and different environmental catastrophes and move the burdens from one place to another, and so in that sense, yeah, I think that energy is the problem.
Yeah, and this perhaps brings me to the last question for you, or the last point of reflection, because this whole project of mine started also from a very weird sense of I don't know whether to call it nostalgia or loss or missed relation with earth, with the ground, and I'm meaning this in many senses, but really the materiality of the soil. And I wondered a lot where the connection lies, but now by talking to you it's becoming clearer and clearer. There are many points of connection. The one is really this also difference between the materiality of the screen and of the electronic digital, even more digital, so the fake immateriality of the digital object, and the opacity, I would say, of soil, of earth, of this kind of minerality, but also what it means. So you were mentioning energy as a price you're paying for your pride, for your vanity, maybe. And this brings me to connecting this digital technology as a kind of mechanism of network that feeds on pride, feeds on identity, feeds on this sense of gained unicity and individuality, because that's what the digital world allows. It allows to also shape markets not anymore according to masses, but to you, to your unique point of view and set of preferences. So there is this node of different elements that revolves around identity and unicity and empowerment, etc., which I think has very good aspects. But on the other hand, it's becoming an exploitation system. And on the other hand, earth, soil, not so much as a collective catalyst, because it's very dangerous now when we mention the land to end up in this vision of the land as where we all come from, etc. But really in the sense of this material which has lost all individuality. So it's earth, soil is the result of decomposition, is the ultimate stage of decomposition of individuals, organic matter, plants, animals, etc.
All right, I love the question about decomposition, soil, and so when you're talking about soil as this kind of ultimate lack of individuality, and of course this is playing on this idea of like death, where when we lose our individual self and then we all go back to this common dust, or we all go to this energetic ether that we're all a part of. And but then also when I think about soil, I also think of liveliness, and that there is, it's not a homogeneous lack of individuality, but in a way it's so fine-grained and so multi-granular, and there's so many different, an unimaginable number of individual beings in a little piece of soil, that in a sense there's something there that's even more, for me, more inspiring in the idea of soil as an original network, or as a network that that when we think of it, we reduce it to a kind of homogeneous lack of individuality, but that's as this kind of way to summarize what is actually so complex that only now can, if you go and talk to an ecologist or soil ecologist, can they say what a piece of what's going on in the soil. So in that sense, if I think of it as this counterbalance to this network that we're building and participating in and sucked into, that we're generating through the smartphone and through the information infrastructure, that now is, again, I feel like almost anything I've said about the phone is, at this point, is old news. It's been for a decade or more the case. But that we're building this network, and if we think of the soil as a kind of counterbalance or a place to learn or reflect on networks and individuality and loss of individuality, then I do find it a source of inspiration. I think, and also maybe there's also this a little bit of homogenization is taking place also in the realm of the smartphone and in the realm of the information system that we're uploading our pieces of ourselves to and downloading pieces of ourselves and becoming kind of these interchangeable hybrid beings of, yes, being here Andrew, but also being the Andrew that you can like on Instagram and or friend on Facebook, or order voice lessons to from my Google business listing as a voice teacher. But then if you took also the billions of people that are part of this information network, I wonder also if there would be a little bit of a sense of summarizing it as a homogeneous whole, if we weren't, but because we are more embedded at this point in the information network, say, than we are in the life of the soil. We pick up more on the individuality and on the fine-grainedness of our artificial information system than we do on the granularity of the soil, and then do that so that we would even like have this idea of like the soil as a unifying, or as a one single concept, instead of like, well, there's the soil on the hill up there, and that's going to be very different than the soil that's just down there on next to the river, and then there's the soil that they built some road in the middle of the river to dig soil out of the bottom of the river right now. It's a little bit crazy out there. Have you looked out there?
Yes.
I uploaded a photo of that to my Instagram.
Okay.
I mean, to try to make it, to say something about the geoengineering, and that just casually in the middle of this mountain river, a bunch of trucks dumped a bunch of rubble in the last few days to do some kind of construction and manage the soil under the river. But I guess I'm going on this little soil tangent to be like, well, there's a complexity there that we don't know because we're not plugged into the soil in the way that we're plugged into our
Yes, right. But I like your proposition, maybe if I can bring it further, to learn something from this impersonality, actually to make of this digital and hyper-connected world something really revolutionary and really forward-looking. So my impression is that this node of identity and, as you say, of hyper ventilation of pride, etc., is what perhaps is preventing the digital world to really bring us somewhere promising, I would say. So perhaps I would like to learn from the soil how to navigate the digital world.
Yeah, well, and the soil is also this ultimate interconnectivity. Right?
It is. So maybe
Right.
it's a good, that like the extreme counterpart of how extreme it could be to live in this environment, because it is our environment today. We cannot just
Although I find your project of living with less connection to the digital world inspiring personally.
Yeah.
Because I think I feel like in the 90s and the rise of post Cold War globalization, there was this kind of new idea of like we're all connected, but that's always been the case. We've always been connected in what our and that's the case on whatever level you look at. And now we see through the internet, as we can share pictures with each other, that we're connected in that kind of shallow sense, but that we've always already been connected. I think I'm a little bit pessimistic in the idea of there being a liberatory version of the internet or of digital technology. But I think it is a good and an important imaginative exercise, because without that imaginative exercise, I think of how things could be good, we can't see the ways in which things are dangerous now, because the surface it presents itself as so sensually alluring that it's so distracting. So I look forward to hearing what comes of the liberatory project of digital technology.
Yeah, me too.
I think we'll have to imagine it outside of capitalism, but that'll be a longer conversation,
which we will have sooner rather than later. Okay, so thank you very much. It's been great talking to you, and
thank you for having me.
Let's see where this all brings us.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's upload it.
Bye.